So of course it starts with the names that I think most of you would recognize. Here it starts with great Vajradhara of the sixth family. So Vajradhara is inseparable from Shakyamuni. In a way, you could say that Vajradhara is just the same, indistinguishable from Buddha Shakyamuni. When we say Vajradhara, we are emphasizing the Vajrayana or the secret mantra aspect of the same Buddha. And so starting with Vajradhara, then Vajradhara to the 85 Indian Mahasiddhas. Again, you may be used to hearing 84 Mahasiddhas, but when you look at these lists of the 84 Mahasiddhas, their names don't always correspond exactly. So 80 plus Mahasiddhas. So 85, I don't know exactly, the particular, source for saying 85, but you can think of it as, these 80 plus Mahasiddhas. So of course the Buddha Dharma was upheld from mouth to ear, so to say, mouth to ear, heart to heart, mind to mind, from Buddha Shakyamuni's time through a lineage of masters and disciples. But here again is emphasizing the period of the flourishing of the Vajrayana in India, which is the time of the 85 Indian Mahasiddhas. And then so among those Mahasiddhas, two Mahasiddhas are highlighted here. Dili Pranyabhadra, we commonly call Tilopa, then Naro Jnanasiddhi, that we call Naropa. So these two were the most significant to this particular transmission. However, there's another significant figure in the same time as Naropa, which is, I would say, also very important. The next name is the name of Marpa, the translator, the Tibetan who came from Tibet, southern Tibet, to Nepal and India, and brought this particular transmission back to India. Another name, another Lama that he studied with, another guru he studied with while in India, was Maitripa. Maitripa was especially important because Maitripa instructed Marpa in the Mahamudra, especially the Mahamudra teachings. Of course, Naro Jnanasiddhi was Marpa's main guru. Then the next name, Marpa of Lodha, then his famous disciple, Milarepa, here Milashepa Dorje. Then after that is Daoshonu of Dakpo. Daoshonu of Dakpo is talking about Gampopa. And there again, Gampopa, before he came to Milarepa, in fact, most of his spiritual training was done within the Kadampa tradition, the tradition that developed in Tibet, originating with the transmission brought from India to Tibet by the Indian Bengali master Atisha Sri Dipangara. So Atisha also had received training and transmissions from both Naropa and Maitripa. Atisha was contemporaneous with Marpa. In fact, Atisha and Marpa met, according to Marpa's biography, in the border region. As Marpa was going towards the south and Atisha was going to the north, they met. So Atisha, in a way, also brought the Naropa and Maitripa transmission. And then his lineage developed in Tibet called the Kadampa, and Gampopa was a monk trained in that system before he went to receive instructions from Milarepa. So that's Daoshono of Dakpo. The three siddhas of Kam refer to Gampopa's three important disciples. The two that we still know very well. One of them is the first Karmapa, Dusung Khenpa. So he came from Kam. Kam is in eastern Tibet. Then the other person that came from Kam to become an important disciple of Gampopa was Pamodrupa. The next name, I supplicate you, Dorje Gyalpo. Dorje Gyalpo was his given name, given Dharma name of Pakdu, Pamodrupa. So that's Dorje Gyalpo, Pamodrupa. So Dorje Gyalpo of Pakdu came from Pakdu area. Dorje Gyalpo or Pamodrupa, before coming to Gampopa, first I believe he was ordained also as a Kadampa monk. Then later he trained with the Sakyapas, becoming the main Sakyapas, one of the main Sakyapa at that time, one of the main Sakyapa lineage holders, main students, Pamodrupa. Then Pamodrupa came and trained with Gampopa, and then never left after that, and remained with Gampopa. And so in this early period, people travel around a lot. These different lineages have not, in a way, have not kind of solidified and rigidified into such clear lineages. And there was a lot of, you could say, cross-fertilization going on of ideas, of practices that went back and forth. People spend periods of time with one teacher and one community, and then move on to another teacher and another community, and then over time, right, they stabilize their own practice. And if they were very, able and had the right karma, they then may have students of their own. And then if those students also have the right karma, then they continue, and then by the 14th century, they solidified into kind of clear lineages. In this early period, really, the notion of lineage as kind of these distinct, sealed off traditions is really not at all the scenario. So anyway, then the next name, the next three names is actually names of the same person, Jikten Sumgön. So Pamodrupa, from Pamodrupa is Jikten Sumgön. His first name is Dorje Peldra. Then his most famous name, Jikten Sumgön. And then his Sanskritized name, Ranashiri, which is a translation of one of his Tibetan Dharma names, Rinchen Pel. So here, Ranashiri. So Dorje Peldra, Jikten Sumgön, Ranashiri refers to the same person. When Jikten Sumgön passed away, he was actually hoping that someone from within his bloodline, meaning one of his nephews, would succeed him. But none of them were old enough at that point. And then maybe those who were old enough, whether cousins or nephews, maybe who were old enough, were maybe not suitable. So instead, a very senior figure within that community, Khenchen Sutrim Dorje, a very senior and well-respected monk, he took leadership of that community. In particular, Jikten Sumgön, like in one example, in one case, Jikten Sumgön wanted his cousin, nephew, cousin, Sherab Jungne, to succeed him. Sherab Jungne, who compiled many of Jikten Sumgön's teachings, and also wrote the first biography of Jikten Sumgön. And Sherab Jungne was, you could say, the closest of all his disciples, who served him as his attendant as well. Almost like the way Ananda served his older cousin, Buddha Shakyamuni, Sherab Jungne served Jikten Sumgön, his uncle. But Sherab Jungne had no interest to become the head of the lineage. And the head of the lineage is not just a spiritual figure, also a lot of administrative decisions and settling disputes and even protecting the place. All of that is expected of them. So Sherab Jungne didn't want. So then I think Khenchen Sutrim Dorje was identified as the most suitable. Khenchen Sutrim Dorje is also the origins of what we today call the Trisap, the Gyabra, Trisap Gyabra Rinpoche's lineage. Originates with Khenchen Sutrim Dorje. So our current future region, Trisap Rinpoche, is considered a reincarnation of Khenchen Sutrim Dorje. Then the next name, Onchen Sonam Drakpa. So Onchen Sonam Drakpa was a nephew, or cousin, once removed, twice removed. Trent and I have been working on these biographies and trying to figure out the right familial vocabulary to use for these figures. Anyway, it's like Onchen Sonam Drakpa is like Jikten Sumgön's fathers, brothers, sons or grandsons. I don't remember exactly. Onchen Sonam Drakpa. So by that time, Onchen Sonam Drakpa was old enough. Then he was the first from the Kyura family. This is Jikten Sumgön's family line called the Kyura. So the first, after Jikten Sumgön, the first Kyura son to sit on the throne was Onchen. Means like nephew. Chen, the great nephew, Sonam Drakpa. Now, the next figure was Chenga Drakpa Jungne. Chenga Drakpa Jungne was an outsider, meaning like not a Kyura. So after Sonam Drakpa passed away, Drakpa Jungne, who was quite senior at that time, Drakpa Jungne lived a pretty long life. Drakpa Jungne was the other very important disciple of Jikten Sumgön. So there was Sherab Jungne and Drakpa Jungne. In fact, in the Golden Temple in Drikung now, when you go inside, the main image is that of Jikten Sumgön, and then on the left and right is Sherab Jungne and Drakpa Jungne. And because they were like the two chief disciples. Now, why did Drakpa Jungne not immediately succeed Jikten Sumgön? Because at that time, he was already anchoring, he was already leading the revived community of Pamodrupa. Pamodrupa's community, Jikten Sumgön's teacher, Pamodrupa's community declined, very strongly declined after Pamodrupa's passing. Then later in Jikten Sumgön's life, when he himself became a prominent teacher with a lot of influence, garnering a lot of respect, the other disciples of Pamodrupa and the people in the local area there came to Jikten Sumgön and pleaded with him and said, please come and rescue your teacher's community, don't let it fall apart like this. And so then Jikten Sumgön sent Dragpa Jungne to go revive that community, and so Dragpa Jungne was busy there. But now Dragpa Jungne came back, and then when he left Pamudrupa's monastery, he appointed his nephew. So this tradition of uncle-nephew or uncle or cousins succeeding was a accepted form of succession during that time. And in fact, blood, they consider, as we say, run thicker than water. So you carry a lot of authority if you are a blood relative of the last head. So this is not necessarily dharma, okay? This is just reflecting how people thought during that time, and then the need to kind of do that, right? I mean, it's not against dharma, but it's not necessarily dharma either, simply because it's a blood relative. But this blood relative, had the ability, dharma-wise, realization-wise, but then on the kind of on looking at the other aspects, you also need someone who have the right conditions, or we might say chemistry, to lead. So Dragpa Jungne came back to anchor his teacher's monastery, to lead his teacher's monastery. And this was really important because right then, and I think very much it's motivated, or the reason behind Dragpa Jungne coming back to Drikung has a lot to do with, this is the beginning, overall in Tibetan history, this is the beginning of the Mongol involvement and interference with Tibetan politics, Tibetan power. And for the next hundreds and hundreds of years, into the 17th, 18th century, the Mongols was a constant presence in Tibet, marching back and forth. And the Mongols were not just one group of Mongols, it was different tribes of Mongols seeking more resources, seeking dominance in that whole area. And so then different groups of Mongols would enter into alliances with different groups of Tibetans. And so Tibet, at this point at least, really isn't, that idyllic paradise on earth that sometimes maybe we imagine it to be. It was difficult times. And so Dragpa Jungne came back because one group of Mongols, they were on their way coming to central Tibet. And in fact, it is said that because of Dragpa Jungne's abilities, including people believe that he had magic power, very important. Whether it's actual magic or psychological warfare, you could say, or psychological defense, it's said that Dragpa Jungne was able to hold back the Mongols, and the Mongols really respected him because he was able to demonstrate his powers, his supernatural powers to the Mongols. And the sources say, the Mongols coming from a shamanic background, as mighty as the sword and the horses were, they were still afraid of supernatural forces. And so Dragpa Jungne was able to prevent them from harming Drikung. Next, Chung-o Doje Dragpa, who succeeded Dragpa Jungne, was a Cura son. Then, next, Toka Rinchen Senge was also a Cura son. Toka means like the one who live in the, like Toka is like the roof. So he lived in the roof. What was he doing on the roof? It's actually almost like you could say the attic. The attic of the Golden Temple was where he spent most of his time in retreat. So he was called the guy in the attic. So he was the next one. And then Samche Drakpasonam. Samche, Sam is retreat. Another one of these Kura sons, who mostly was in retreat, he was the next throne holder. Now, between Drakpasonam and Chuni Dorje Rinchen, okay, major disaster. And in fact, Dorje Rinchen himself experienced it. Drakpasonam, I think, passed away by then. And between these two names is the year 1290. In the year 1290, finally one group of Mongols came and completely burned Drikung to nothing. Yeah, this is called Drikung Linglok in Tibetan, the massacre at Drikung. And according to the Drikung sources, the only people who survived this were those powerful enough to actually take flight, like fly away, however you want to understand that. So Dorje Rinchen and Dorje Gyalpo were the two young sons of the Kura family. The throne holder at that time during the destruction was Chogoba. Chogoba is not in this list here, but Chogoba is said, escaped with the two young boys and carried them and flew off to southern Tibet as refugees. And they hid there for a while. Eventually, the same Mongols who came and burned it down, their spiritual teachers, who were the Sakyapas, persuaded these Mongols to help rebuild Drikung. So the Mongols came and burned down Drikung not because of like dharma matters. It's not a fight over doctrine or dharma. It was because at that time, right, the Drikung authorities, including the secular authorities and mostly the secular authorities, between Drapajungne, right, and the burning of Drikung, more and more the Drikung area authorities felt they can't stay neutral. They need to align themselves with some powerful Mongol tribe. But I guess you could say they placed their bets on the wrong tribe. So this other tribe was able, this other group was able to come and burn it down. Again, not because of dharma, but internal Mongol struggles playing out in the land of snows. I'm telling you this why? Not to bring up just for the sake of knowing Tibetan history. I'm telling you this because don't make excuses. Oh, it's really difficult. I don't know, practice dharma. I have so many responsibilities. I have this, I have that, I have this, I have that. Hey, none of us have Mongols, about to enter your state and threatening to burn it down. We might sometimes feel like there are Mongols, at the gates, about to invade. But, objectively, no, I am very sure none of us live in any of these conditions. But nonetheless, as these were difficult times for Tibetans and and for the people in Drikung. In one of the teachings of Jikten Sumgön that we have looked at and translated, you hear Jikten Sumgön's voice very clearly. This was towards the end of his life, and he sort of said, not sort of, he said, I have seen a lot of difficulties in my life. I have met with a lot of obstacles. And then he said, not just before I became a prominent teacher with so many students, even after I became this famous teacher, he said, continuously in my community, he said, there were problems after problems after problems. He says, plagued with problems, sometimes I feel like just running away. So it's, to me, it's really inspiring to hear this. How authentic, how real, how vulnerable, and not afraid of admitting, like, it's not been easy, he says. Problem after problem. And he said, but I never gave up. So take that to heart. So now, a little bit of the great Drikung teachings to the assembly. In the last section that we covered, he said, if we want to develop calm abiding, right, then the very first step is to develop a distaste, you could say a distaste for the distractions of samsara. So in chapter 8 of Bodhicayyavatara especially, that chapter really focuses on how to achieve meditative concentration, the fifth of the 6 paramitas, how to practice meditative concentration by, on the one hand, again and again, right? From various different directions, different ways of looking at it, to remind ourselves of the unsatisfactory nature of worldly, mundane pursuits. And in Bodhicayyavatara especially, it was focused on the undesirable nature of bodies. But the bigger point is not really, and be careful, this is not encouraging I hate my body, and then in the wake of I hate my body, I need to modify my body, I need to do this and to do that to make it look better so that I feel better. No, we're not talking about that. It's a much deeper kind of way of training to relate to the demands of, I guess you could put it that way, the demands, our mental, emotional, and physical demands that we keep giving into in an unskillful way. So that where is need and where is demand, that line is crossed, then we get dragged around for no reason. The other part of that chapter is the positive part, so to say. And the first part is what not to do, and all the techniques of how not to do that. And the second part is how to stabilize instead, to let the mind stabilize in a commitment to the awakening of all beings, bodhicitta. So that chapter 8 have these two sides to it. So here, Jikten Sumgön also quotes Shantideva and say that the first matter to train in is to train in developing a distaste. At the very least, developing an ability to not so easily get dragged around by the desires of our senses, sensuality, to cultivate restraint with regards to that. Again, the Buddha isn't running an anti-fun, anti-pleasure cult. The problem is not with fun and pleasure and satisfaction. In fact, he taught many ways, to experience this, but in a skillful way. The issue is really about skillful or not skillful. What sorts of objects that even though temporarily can bring a sense of satisfaction, joy, or pleasure, or bliss, may very quickly, turn into a cause of suffering. Those are unskillful. And then there are skillful ways of bringing satisfaction, joy, bliss. The kind of satisfaction, joy, bliss, pleasure, fun, that don't have side effects, as we said. Buddha taught that, as well. Then here, expanding on, the topic of calm abiding and insight. Distraction gives rise to samsara. A mind evenly settled in absorption, in equipoise. In absorption and equipoise in what? In calm abiding and insight, that gives rise to nirvana. Since what we want is nirvana and what we don't want is samsara, then we need to know how to cultivate calm abiding and insight. So next section, in addition to abandoning desire for this world, a qualified Lama is still necessary for the meditative absorptions of calm abiding and insight to arise in your being. So the exact technical term is mind stream. Here I think we can use in your being. How the meditative absorption of calm abiding and insight can arise in your being. The best qualified Lama has extensive higher perception that perceives the three times. So what this business of perceiving the three times, ability to see past, present, and future. In our kind of superficial way of understanding, ability to know past, present, and future, we think of it as almost like a magical skill, a good trick to have, and you can surprise people, and by telling them things about their past or predicting things that will happen in the future and shock and awe them, wow, But here is really talking about what? This superior guru who somehow can see, not somehow, we know how, by removing their obscurations. They can see karmic causality that ties, that when they observe a current condition situation, and when they use their mind, they can immediately see what are the past causes and conditions that have led to the present situation, and how, when people behave a certain way in the present situation, how this then gives rise to a future condition, a future situation. So he says here, the best qualified Lama is someone who can see that. So then, if they can do that, then in order to arouse meditative absorption of calm abiding in the mind stream of the disciple, the Lama can give instructions that accord with habits from the disciple's previous lives. So the ability of the Guru to guide someone is way superior when such a Guru knows this person's past, including past lifetimes. In this way, it won't be difficult for the meditative absorption of calm abiding to arise in the disciple's mind stream, in the disciple's being. Lama Gagyal's and Master Nagar Bodhi's cases are like this. So 249, the footnote says, Lama Gagyal was a goatherd. After certain remarkable experiences connected to his deity practice of Chundatara, he was initially misguided by a Lama who told him that the experiences were demonic influences. Only when he later related the experiences to Guru Lotsawa did he learn that Chundatara was indeed his meditation deity from a past life. Yeah, so apparently, he did this Chundatara practice, and then, positive signs came very quickly. He's had visions of this Tara. Then he asked one guide, but that guide, said, "Oh no, these are demonic, meaning like they are not authentic. Don't pay attention to them." But in this case, it's actually an authentic experience. Most of the time these days, I think lamas will, when you go to them and tell them, supernatural things like that, they will say, "Oh yes, all right, oh yes, wonderful, yeah," And then when you listen to it, right, you're like, "Oh, very nice." We always want to hear when people say, "Oh yes, your vision of that deity, yes, that was good, that was real." Makes us feel better. So these days we have the opposite problem than Lama Gagyal's case, I think, generally speaking. Nagabodhi's case is already mentioned in the earlier section. Basically, Nagabodhi was said to be a disciple of Nagarjuna, and Nagabodhi had trouble focusing his mind. So Nagarjuna was able to see Nagabodhi's past, and then told Nagabodhi to place his mind on a tree. Imagine a tree growing out of the top of his head. Because in the past, Nagabodhi, last few lifetimes, he had been a wood collector in the forest for firewood. And so he has this affinity with trees, according to one telling of this story. There's a variant story which says that somehow Nagabodhi had some kind of growth on top of his head, almost like a horn, like a unicorn's horn. I mean, not so prominent, but nonetheless, there's a growth, a bony growth up here. So then Nagarjuna told him to focus his mind on that horn. And this has something to do with his past life. Yeah? In general, there's no particular object that is the only designated focus for calm abiding. So then, more generally, Jikten Sumgön says, for cultivating calm abiding, it's not just one object. A mind that is abiding single-pointedly in meditative absorption on any object can be called calm abiding. Now, how can we understand such a broad matter if we think calm abiding is only bliss, clarity, and non-thought? So here, these three parts, these three qualities, bliss, clarity, and non-thought, these are said to be available to experience when the mind becomes very settle and focus. You can have the experience of bliss, of clarity and absence of thought when your mind is no longer running around, no longer scattered, content, happy, to just abide, to just stay. So here, Jikten Sumgön is asking, if we think that, calm abiding is only when these things occur, then is it true, Then he says, desire is a gateway to the Dharma, and it is taught that aversion, delusion, loving kindness, compassion, and so forth are each likewise gateways to the Dharma. Isn't each of them calm abiding? Isn't each of them a way to get to calm abiding? Still, it must be a one-pointed abiding and over a longer period of time. So what he's saying here is that he says, although we tend to think, only when these sublime states of bliss, clarity, and absence of thought is truly calm abiding, he is saying here that actually, in order to begin training with calm abiding, if you have the skill, even something like desire, aversion, delusion, loving kindness, compassion, they can be gateways. He's not saying automatically they are gateways, but they can be. Yeah? Not just, those bliss, clarity, absence of thought that we all want. Because often those are said to be both the cause and the result of calm abiding. So here Jikten Sumgön says, no, actually, even desire can be. Now, of course, Jikten Sumgön is not saying, you go, or you go take desire. Just anyone can, meditate on desire and have calm abiding, and meditate on anger and have calm abiding. It might be abiding, but it's not calm, right? I'm sure Jikten Sumgön will also agree. Here he's just saying, don't just look at sublime states as your only object for calm abiding. Even the undesirable states, if you know how to, they can help focus your mind. Then he says, now, focus, not just fleeting focus. It should be a abiding focus. It should be a focus that continues. Now he says, isn't each of them calm abiding? Still, it must be a one-pointed abiding and over a longer period of time. Again, this depends on training in higher moral ethics. So then he says, this is how he makes sure that, even if we're going to use desire or aversion, it's not just desire and aversion, these kleshas, without doing anything about it. You need to bring in disciplined conduct. Therefore, the outer disciplined conduct of the body should be without even the slightest transgression of the rules, as the Buddha formulated them, and the inner disciplined conduct of the mind should be the discontinuation of the three afflictions: ignorance, desire, and hatred. So if you do use desire as an object for calm abiding, then how you work with that is not feeding that desire and let the desire grow stronger and stronger, but it's calm abiding in the sense of you look directly at that desire, not try to pretend it's not there or push it aside. You look directly at it and you cut it. And you say, how do I cut? Determination. Seeing this like, this is an enemy. this is a fault. This, I have no place in my heart for this. And so I'm going to cut it. Then you say, how to cut? Well, it's ephemeral in the first place. Let it go. Relinquish. So you have to recruit disciplined conduct, both on the outer aspects of disciplined conduct and the inner aspects of disciplined conduct. Bring it to this training. The disciplined conduct of the secret Mahayana, i.e. the practice of secret mantra, should be the will of nectar. The will of nectar, the footnote here says it refers to a deity, Amrita Kundalin, and Dutsikilwa. I am not sure if this is the exact reference here. Yes, of course, the name Dutsikilwa is referring to a wrathful deity for cleansing, but here I think is talking about something else. And this is talking about the swill of joy as a way to transform. So secret mantra methods of turning to an experience of joy and then letting that experience grow in order to destroy desire. I think it's talking about that. The mind with all of these will be free from regret and able to abide in one-pointed meditative absorption. So I think if you see this as when he says the outer the applying of disciplined conduct, both the outer aspects and the inner aspect, joined together with secret mantra method of cultivating joy, and the swirl of nectar, which is the swirl of joy, the coalescing of joy. Here it's saying, you can then turn desire into joy. Let the experience of that joy cut the desire. Not abiding by these levels of disciplined conduct, a mind with regret won't be able to abide in meditative absorption when engaging in absorption is attempted. So here it's saying, it is saying, if you don't abide by, if you don't rely on these, on disciplined conduct and the Vajrayana method of the swirl of joy, then even if you have techniques, even if you apply the techniques of giving rise to mental absorption, meditative absorption, you will fail. You will fail. Therefore, be very careful about disciplined conduct. When you understand that the 84,000 gateways to the Dharma as taught by the Buddha were still just a summary, there will be nothing that is not a gateway to the Dharma for you. Then now going back to the initial point, it says that if you're able to understand, the so-called 84,000 dharmas that the Buddha taught, it's just a summary. Then, for as many conditions and situations and kleshas as there are as many ways to work with the mind. Yeah, so today we're going to stop here. But before we stop, we can have a few minutes of, if in case you have any questions, comments? Question about the history stuff that I shared or the section we just read? Comments? Very good to be able to see so many of you this morning. You all heard my pitch yesterday for not being shy to turn on your video and the advantages of being able to do that. It's an offering, as I said yesterday. Yes, no, maybe. Oh, everything good, huh? Oh, yeah.
Yes, I think I know what you're getting at. We have to drive an enormous amount of the time
Uh-huh.
to get there from Black Mountain,
Yes.
and I've always had a fear of an automobile accident.
Mm-hmm.
And I've started this last 6 months saying, I don't need that. And it's cutting through.
The false Mongols, right?
It's working. It cuts through it. It works. So I'm going to work on more things with this thing you said.
Yeah.
The same principle.
Right. It's good to be careful, you know. I think a lot of our fears and hopes, right, arise from quote unquote the right place, you know. It's good to be sensible about driving carefully, not, you know, hurting ourselves, not hurting others, you know. So even like our selfish genes, you know, I'm been reading, I mean, not in a very disciplined way, but somehow the recent readings I've been doing, you know, the New Yorker or BBC listening, a particular theme is emerging about like, they're all looking at evolutionary processes and evolutionary biology, and how, like this morning, what I was listening to while I was getting ready, making my coffee, I was talking about how Darwin, you know, in one of his passages, he said, you know, I can no longer, he said, believe in the idea that a benevolent God created all of this, because when you look at nature, by human standards, nature is very cruel. You know, it's talking about how like larvae, you know, the way that certain insects would, you know, do certain just for survival, you know, like by human standards, they're like, you know, oh, really like, eesh, gosh, you know, a female, right, grasshopper, not grasshopper, a certain kind of insect, you know, would eat the male. If the male is fertilizing, and then the male would continue, you know, and like these genetic coding is just, you know, on that level, by human standards, is very cruel, you know. Now, of course, you know, there are times where we look at some beautiful thing, beautiful sunset, we look at, you know, and we say, oh, this is so wonderful, this is so beautiful, oh, God is so good, you know. Surely there's a God in the world, you know, who have done all of this. Anyway, you know, I digress, you know, like, so I think, like, on some level, right, in our fears and our hopes is what has kept us alive, personally and as a species, right? But where have we personally and as a species crossed the line? I think that is where the Dharma can help us a lot, even from that purely secular perspective. Yeah? Which I'm not necessarily advocating that you all should take that approach, but at the very least, if you're not yet sold on Buddha Dharma and its claims and its,
Make
just
another
purely,
statement.
from a secular level, I think we can see how the Buddha Dharma serves as a check and balance to these ancient, impulses. So I'm glad the Dharma is able to work for you that way.
Well, can I say one more thing?
Yes, please, please.
What you're saying a few minutes ago is even more important, is because I'm 88, I'm too old to drive. I'm having to depend on a very excellent driver that's sitting next to me, Tammy. And she is about the best driver you'll ever find. But I'm still sitting there thinking to myself, uh-oh, and it has nothing to do with what's going on. It's almost a fear within me.
Yes.
And by telling myself, I don't need that, I even use a fist to tell me.
Correct.
It's more applying your principle that you said a little bit ago. I think because it's just downright cutting it.
Yes, in that case, for sure,
It works.
Yes. Excellent.
So there's other things I can apply this to.
Yep. Me too,
So thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah, me too. And knowing when to remember these points and to be able to apply, And there's no secret, no technique except to apply, to say no,
Yep.
That is the method, We sometimes think that, oh, maybe, there's some secret method. Like I have people ask me, so how do you do this? Actually, most of the time, I think we know how to do this, but because the power of habit is so strong, right? Then we even cannot imagine that it is possible to say stop to yourself. But we definitely don't hesitate, to tell other people stop and expect them to stop.
That's true.
With ourselves, we say, oh no, it's not going to work. Then we say, oh, Lama, can you tell me how? Easier said than done. How?
We just don't do it. We say, I don't need that.
Do it. And that's because the power of habit, have convinced us it's not possible to just say stop. But that doesn't, stop us from going around telling other people to stop and expecting them to stop and then yelling at them for not stopping.
That's true.
This is how we are, Okay. We will dedicate and then see everyone on Monday. Those of you who do the Ladrup Ngondro, tomorrow, a reminder, at 11, there is Ladrup Ngondro practice available through the Ladrup Zoom room. So, okay. Chanju sem chorim poche ma ge banan ge gyurche ge ba nyam pa me pa ya gone gondu Speaking of false Mongols, there are like I'm as you all know, I'm often gone, and so I just realized that it's been a while since at this period of the year that I've not been at home. But right now I'm at home, and what does this mean? It's like for the last couple of weeks, starting from the last couple of weeks, and it probably will go on for another week. It feels like Mongols are bombing my house. There's a big oak tree in my neighbor's yard, and I have a metal roof. It's like tom 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 tom. These acorns just showering down. It's like a hailstorm, and it's like, gosh, this is really loud. All days of day and night, it's like tom 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 tom. Anyway, happy fall. Bye bye.